Welcome to another episode of CWC Art and Soul. It's Catherine Whalen Costin. So happy that you stopped by. Today I thought I'd talk about grief, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of what the seasons can teach us about grief, how to handle it. How does nature handle grief? So if that's something that you've been thinking about and trying to figure out your way around grief, this is for you. Gems of wisdom. So it's March, spring in 2023 in Canada, and that's where I'm at. And March is always a month where I get a little bit reflective because March was the month that my son was killed in a car accident or vehicle accident in 2012. And I have talked about that situation in various podcasts with guests, by myself, sharing with you my experience of that. But right now, I really wanted to talk about the reflecting on the seasons. And I think about nature and the way that we flow. In Canada, we have definite seasons, although sometimes it seems like we're having them all in the same day. Spring and winter and summer sometimes. But for the most part, we have seasons defined. We're in spring, we'll move into summer. It's not a very fast process. It takes time. And then from summer back to fall, and then winter again. And that's really life. You know, there's an old biblical parable or poem about the seasons of life, which was turned into a song. For everything there is a reason, there is a season. And this is true. And I find it remarkable when I think about humans, because from the time we're very young, we are conditioned, or we expect, or perhaps it's part of our survival instinct, that we object to any form of loss, any form of change that means we don't have what we did have in our lives at any given time. You know, the bottle is taken away, the breast is taken away for when we're nursing and we're trying to be weaned. The parents wanting, and the mother's wanting to wean the baby, and there's an objection. This is the way it was, and this is the way it always must be. And of course, we know that is not the case. We do grow and learn and change and adapt. We must. We absolutely must. We cannot stay in that infant stage and thrive as a species. So we do adapt to a certain degree. When I think about the seasons and I think about spring and the rebirth of the trees, the blossoms on the trees, and we know everything has consciousness, we also know that it's only humans that have that ability to project into the future or hang on to the past. And those are the two places that many of us tend to live in. What's going to happen, what did happen, for good or for evil, you know? What are we expecting, what are we anticipating, are we excited about, or are we dreading? And one of the things that is often said to, particularly me, because I'm a mother and my son died, and a lot of people have said to me, well, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. And of course, I have a totally different point of view on that. It is absolutely not the worst thing that could happen to me. It is an event that is very challenging to let go of someone you love and allow them to move into their next season without you. And especially for you to remain on the planet without them. Because we have expectations, and a lot of these expectations are learned. We expect things to progress in a certain way. So the key here is, yes, there's a lot of discussion around grief is a process. It's a cycle. We go through anger, we go through deep sorrow, depression, and then finally acceptance. And for the most part, I would agree that it is cyclical. It does have its periods of, as we process. It's a processing period. And a lot of the processing and the way we process, it will have to do with our beliefs. That is a huge part of the experience. Our beliefs about life are so intrinsically defining all of life. Whether you perceive an event as that you won something or you lost something. Are you a lucky person, or are you an unfortunate person? It's very interesting because I've had numerous tragedies and deaths in my family at different phases in my life, which I have talked about in great detail in my memoir, Permission to Breathe, which you can get on my website, and it's available in a paperback. It's available in a PDF download as well. And I encourage people to read it, not simply just because I want to tell a story. In fact, I didn't really want to tell my story, except that I learned so much by writing it, by researching and exploring, and in my healing journey, the insights that came to me, I felt were beneficial to share with others so they don't have to go through the journey. You will have to go through your own journey, of course. Grief is very personal. However, sometimes when we look at life through a different lens, someone else's story, we can get insight for ourselves. That is what happened to me in researching, reading, exploring, analyzing, because I analyze everything. I really learned and changed and reframed the way I saw events. And that makes a big difference. So even though, yes, I experienced the death of my son, he was 29 years old, in many ways that can be seen as tragic in the sense, because of the way our society looks at things, well, there was so much potential left unlived, because we have a life expectancy, we call it that. For men it's, close to 80. For women it's a little bit older, and getting older all the time for men and women, depending on where you live in the world. So we have an expectation. You're born, you're going to stay on the planet for this many years. This is the expectation. Unless something unexpected, tragic happens. Illness, accident, those kinds of things, or someone else taking your life, like we don't expect those things. So it's the expectation that really plays a big part in how we grieve. This has been my experience. My mother was a widow when she was 35. My father died unexpectedly, prematurely. of a massive heart attack at 37, leaving her as a widow with 5 children to raise, and very little expectation. I mean, even though he was a policeman. And so there was always that possibility that he would go out on a call and may not come home someday. And yet, when it really happened, there was no ability for my mom. My mom did not have the skills or the awareness that this could have possibly happened. She felt completely blindsided. And I think that when that happens, we don't handle the rest of the components very well. And I think that's where being prepared for what we would call unexpected events, but potentials, that's why you write a will, that's why you have life insurance, that's why you let people know your wishes, whether you want to be an organ donor and things like that. That is a way of talking about the possibility. Because the one thing, we have this expectation about life expectancy, but the one thing we really know is that we don't know. And I think that's where we can, in a sense, arm ourselves to prepare ourselves with the prepare for the best, but know that it's possible that you're going to leave earlier than maybe you expect and maybe other people expect. For me, when I look at my son's life, I am able to say he looks like he was completely finished, that he was done. Even though it was an accident, even though it wasn't suicide, even though there wasn't anyone else involved as far as taking his life, there wasn't someone else driving the vehicle, but just the same, it was clear to me that he was done. So why do we believe that someone else owes us to stay on this planet if they're done? Or do we believe that? Is that part of the grief? I know that I've heard that from many people, that it's not fair, but we already know it's not fair. And so it's a subject that we don't talk about. And I think that in many cases we don't talk about it. And I think because we don't talk about it, we are all left alone in our thoughts until it happens in our family to someone close to us. And at that point, we all often, in polite society, have certain responses. My condolences to your family, my sympathies to your family. That's terrible. That's, we react as if this is so uncommon. And the other part of it is the perception that all children outlive their parents. We know that's not true. It's simply not true. All children don't outlive their parents. All people who live a healthy lifestyle don't live to old age. We have generalities and expectations that are just not based on fact. It can happen to anyone at any time. We're going to leave the planet, and there is only one way off the planet. So when we can come to accepting that is a possibility, then the grieving process can be much more holistic, much more natural. Yes, you're going to cry, you're going to be sad, you're going to have those moments, but it's not totally unexpected. And the other part of it is to look at our perception, what things mean. Now, if you've read my book, you'll know that I was also had a lot of experiences of trauma, different kinds of trauma. And one of the things that happens very often when we're traumatized, especially when we're very young, we take meaning from our circumstances especially if we don't have anyone to talk to about our particular situation. What did it mean? So for me, hearing when I was a child that I was an orphan, that was the word that was used. It's used on government forms. It's, the widows and orphans. It's very common because you're a minor child under the age of 18, and so you're an orphan. And what did being an orphan mean? And I had all kinds of ideas about that label that made me less than, made me really an outcast in society because I didn't have a father anymore. Well, of course I had a father. It's just that he had left the planet. But to a child, if you don't have the ability to express those things, or if you are told certain things, and maybe they're just somebody says something not thinking, because we always talk about children are so resilient. Well, children do learn to cope. They learn to adapt. That doesn't make it healthy. And how we perceive events and particular loss is going to change the way we're going to grieve. We can go through blaming ourselves. That's one way. Another thing is to think that we are less than because something happened. And I remember when someone heard about my son's death and knew my family and knew about the other tragedies that had happened, and they said to me, "Wow, if your family had any luck at all, it would all be bad." And I thought, what's luck got to do with it? But there are people who grow up with their family, with their parents. There's no divorce, there's no deaths, they have grandparents, siblings, and they get into old age without the loss of anyone really close to them. So looking at my situation, they might think, well, that's very unlucky. It's nothing to do with luck. And from my belief system, I understand that each one of us, each member of my family that left prematurely, as we say, left right on time for whatever we were meant to experience. And so even though it's hard, it's made harder by people's beliefs very often, by our beliefs on what does it mean to be a widow, be an orphan, or, be a parent whose child dies. What does it mean? Does it mean you're not a good enough parent? Does it mean you did something wrong? Why would God punish me this way? You hear all kinds of things like that. And I think it comes from the beliefs that we've collectively agreed to, that it's supposed to be a certain way. You're supposed to get married and be married for life. And yet we know people get divorced all the time. It doesn't always. With longer lifespans, people have multiple marriages. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it that you're a bad person. It means that you finished that relationship. There's a saying, there is a reason, a season, a lifetime for people to come into your life. Rarely a lifetime. So friends come and go. We lose a friendship. Does that make us bad? No. It makes it the process of life. So when the buds are coming out on the trees, and I look at that and I think, well, that's new life. It's rebirth. And when, they're all in their summer splendor, just being wonderful, Mother Earth, the trees, the beauty, there's no grief in that. Of course not, because they're celebrating, right? But in the fall, when those leaves drop, there is no grief in that either. Although it's an energy that we perceive that way. But it's very natural. The leaves are going to drop. Even though there is no awareness, no consciousness of future, don't worry, I'll bloom again in spring. And that's where we could learn so much from that. Because in spring, you know, when my son left this planet, I could consider that a fall. And then there's that period of winter, of being quiet, going into that grief, experiencing reflection on his life, on my life, on, okay, things have changed. Now, I'm still here on the planet. I still have a life to live. I still have things to do. He's done. So his leaving my life doesn't define me. It's an event that I reflect back on with love. So and the joy of having him ever have been in my life, blessing me all those years, and then moving on to another journey, which is another spring, a rebirth, but it's not on this planet. And, you know, believing, knowing I'm going to see him again because I feel his energy around me all the time. And that comes from that experience, the wisdom that comes from experiences that you've reflected on and picked apart and analyzed, and it becomes part of you. So grief is a natural process. It's what do we do with it? Do we let it consume us, define us? Like when I came into this earth, I was a daughter first. Daughter and a granddaughter, sibling. And I grew up and I became a wife, and then I was divorced. So now I'm not a wife. These are roles I was playing. I became a mother, and then when my son transitioned off the planet, I'm still a mother, and also I'm still a woman. I'm still my own person. I still have work to do. I'm still on the planet. So I was never, the who I am is not defined by the roles I've played. I've worked in various industries and moved out of them. And it doesn't mean I'm a bad person because I no longer want to work in that industry, or because they didn't want me to work in that. You know, you get fired from a job, or you decide you want a different job, or, you know, these are stages and phases. I think it would be more unnatural if we were to stay in and not grow from each experience. So I invite you to look at the seasons that offer us kind of a way to naturally go through the processes of birth, the joy, and just really celebrate the joy when it comes, knowing that there is going to be another side, not to not enjoy it because you know something bad's going to happen. If you're too joyful, you know, it'll be gone. It'll be taken from you, or it'll be too hard to let it go. No, if I had not enjoyed my son in his life, that would have made it hard. That's where the grief is very difficult, when you have that regret. And the other part of that is, why do we regret? Because we thought there was going to be so much time? Because we thought, you know, it wouldn't matter if we, you know, don't spend time with the people that we love? We spent the time that for whatever reason we could. And so you can't go back there and change that. If you didn't tell someone that you loved them as often as you believe you wish you should have, tell it to them now. There's nothing stopping you. There are no barriers. Once they've transitioned, they're in spirit form. They can still sense your energy towards them, their love towards them. If there's something you feel like you need to forgive them for, or to ask them to forgive you, then do it. We know so much more about energy and the energy, the many dimensions and life itself than we did many years ago. That really, we can just keep learning. We don't have to let ourselves be defined by these roles, by the things that happen to us, the events in our lives. We climb a mountain and then forever we're just, there's that mountain climbing person. No, there's so much more to a human being. We aren't one thing. We are meant to change. And even though we don't like it when people change, we don't like seeing change in other people because we're used to a certain way of being. We get comfortable. But change is natural. The seasons that's natural. That's nature. That's what happens. And so I'm not saying to tell children, oh, well, we expect you to die before you're the age of whatever. Just don't. You just don't have to. We know and be comfortable with. There's only one way off this planet. We know that. So enjoy it. Enjoy it for as long as you're here and for the people that are in your life, as long as they're here. But when someone leaves your life, if you are still here, you still have things to do. And there should be no guilt in embracing your life, finding joy, finding things to be joyful about. I can have a moment of sorrow thinking about, gee, I wish my son was here. And at the same time, be joyful. I can do things in my life that bring me great joy. And he would want nothing more than that. There's nothing, I just feel that when people are on the other side and they're looking at us and we're sitting here with our heads in our hands crying all the time and not living our lives, how sad that must be for them. Because they had to go. They had to leave the party. And here we are, not having fun at the party at all because we're wrapped in grief. And I'm not saying that you're wrong if you're feeling that. But reason I wanted to share this is to share, I really think we can learn from the seasons. We can learn from each other. And we don't have to allow events of our lives, whether, you can have a great moment of celebration. You can have something happen in your life where you're on a stage and you're being celebrated. You've accomplished something really amazing, and, I paint a painting and people are in awe and it's wonderful and it's fantastic. That's a moment in time and I enjoy it, but it doesn't define me. I'm not always going to be on that stage in that limelight getting applause. Tomorrow, there will be another day. Tomorrow I might be cleaning toilets and vacuuming my house and doing laundry. We're all those things. So when we're in grief, when we're in anger, when we're in denial, that's a phase and a stage, but a lot of it comes from how deeply we believe something should or should not have happened. If you're really believing that you should not have someone you love die, if you really believe you're supposed to die first, if you really believe that you're not supposed to be divorced or have a separation from your spouse, you really believe that the job you got when you were 18 is supposed to last you your lifetime, if those are your beliefs, you're going to be experiencing grief much harder than someone who understands, like the seasons, the leaves are going to fall. The earth is going to go into a dormant cycle. There is going to be change. If it's winter, it's going to snow. It's not going to be sunshine every day. You're going to have cloudy skies and frozen earth, and you're going to experience that kind of feeling inside yourself that I really don't want to party today, but I might party again in the future. And give yourself permission to have your fall, your winter, and then rebirth in spring. Let yourself know it is a phase, it is a stage, it is natural. But it doesn't have to, you don't have to spend the rest of your life, the time that you're on the planet, being buried in grief. I don't think that's how it's meant to be at all. And I really think that watching the birds, I watched the robins building their nest, and it got blown away. I don't know how many times, and they kept building it, because it kept building it in a spot that was particularly windy. But finally, it rained a little bit, and they could make mud, and their nest was much more secure. So, but they kept going, even though their home was destroyed. Sometimes their eggs get taken by other birds, and they still come back and build another nest every year. And sometimes it rains and gives them that nourishment they need and the mud they need to build something stronger. And sometimes we can build something stronger with our rain, with our tears. Sometimes we can cleanse ourselves and rebuild. Sometimes there is a loss, but it doesn't mean you're a bad person because you lost someone that you loved. It simply means you were having a human experience with tremendous love, and they're not in your life anymore. And it doesn't mean you're going to replace them. You don't have to fill that hole. It will get smaller. That hole in your heart, that huge hole, when they leave, it's not going to stay that way. But you can fill it with love. You can fill it with love for the life you still have, for the other people around you, for the other events that are coming. You don't have to wear that grief like a blanket. You really don't. And I see so many people saying their marriage broke up after a child died. Well, I really will say this. I think that a marriage that breaks up because of the death of a child, that marriage was already likely in conflict. The child dying didn't make the marriage break up, but it just revealed the bigger places where maybe there wasn't a connection. Maybe there wasn't the solid foundation they thought they had. And maybe if the child was sick and they were both focusing on taking care of the child, or maybe one was carrying more of a load, and there's going to be, we look for someone to blame. We look for someone to blame even when the events are perfectly natural. And there are people who are probably listening to this will say it's not natural for a child to die before the parents. It's not natural, but it is natural. It is natural. It's just not what we want. It's not what we expect. It's not the way we've been conditioned. My grandmother buried, I think, 5 of her children and many grandchildren before she died at 102, and a husband. Was it natural? Yes. Sadly, it was. It was natural. And there's so much we don't understand, and I think that's part of it. It's man trying to make themselves God, as if we're supposed to know what we are not supposed to know. What it's impossible for us to know in our human form. We scrunch down from this huge spirit into these little tiny bodies to experience life on planet Earth. And it seems it's part of the game that we don't know when we're going to leave. That we're not meant to know. We're meant to, I just have this very strong sense that we know it when we're getting on this ride called planet Earth. That we don't know. That we're not going to know. We're going to have this amnesia so that we can have the fun of the experience. It's like playing pin the tail on the donkey. We do put a blindfold on to play that game. Then we spin people around because we want them to not know. The game is fun because we don't know and we can't see. And that's kind of, even though we take life very, very seriously, and life and death even more serious, it's not meant to be. I think it's meant to be fun. And where we can find the joy and amplify that joy, that's gold. That's where we really are going to find that life has juice and more reward for us, instead of focusing on what happened to us that was unpleasant. And there's a lot of reasons for grief, but I really emphasize this. A lot of the depth of the grief and the length of time of the grief has to do with our beliefs. And know this, just like wintertime, that blanket of frozen earth, frozen snow, you are not going to rush Mother Earth to get over winter. And you can't rush anyone else to get over their grief. It's not going to happen. Every season starts when it starts, not when someone forces it to. You can't force spring to come. But with a little awareness in our belief systems, in our circumstances, in life itself, we can navigate the seasons in a much healthier, much more joyful way, more peace in it, to be peaceful in our grief period when we are wearing that mantle of grief, of feeling shut down, of feeling there's no hope. Spring will come. We don't have to force it, and we're not going to get over it, but we can understand it when we consider it. So if you're not in grief right now, but you know someone who is, or this topic has appealed to you, I ask you to examine your beliefs around it so that if it is coming up for you, you kind of have some ideas of maybe you could navigate it a little bit better. You know, if my mother had have had a different point of view, things might have been very different. Mind you, I wouldn't have written my book. So there you go. There's always a silver lining. And I hope you find that silver lining, and I wish you the very, very best. I hope you've enjoyed the art that I've been showing you while we've been discussing this, because that is a place where I have found a great deal of joy. And I wouldn't have found it if I didn't embrace my life, the gifts that were given to me by the Creator, and for me to use, not for me to hide and think my life was over because my child left the planet. My life wasn't over. I have much, much more to do. And I intend to live my best life so that when I leave the planet, people will say the same about me that I'm saying about my son. And that's, wow, lived fully. And they were done. And they left. And I would want them to celebrate that. And I hope you can find a glimmer of positivity in what I'm sharing with you. And if you want more information on what I share in my book, a lot of it is insights on what happens when we aren't prepared, and giving you my looking back thoughts on what could have been maybe different. So you can get the book, Permission to Breathe, on cwcartandsoul.com, along with my original acrylic art paintings and my fashions. There's a link on the website to take you directly to the fashions that I design from my artwork, which are made in Canada, and I absolutely love them, and I hope you do too. So I invite you to explore. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments section or to send me contact me through my website and send me a message, and I will respond to you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you this spring 2023. Until next time, take care. Take care.